The kitchen stays closed after 10. No exceptions. It's for your own good.
You don't prevent a law by removing the cure.
African Karma Stories.
It's after midnight in Westlands, and the apartment is holding its breath. Grace Otieno wakes up wrong. Not pain, not fever. Something quieter. A sudden emptiness behind her ribs, like her blood has forgotten how to carry her. She sits up slowly. The sheet sticks to her back. Sweat, cold and thin. Her tongue feels too big for her mouth. She knows this feeling. She has known it for years. Low sugar. Grace swings her feet to the floor and waits for the room to stop tilting. Her hands search the bedside table by memory. Nothing. No sweets, no glucose tablets. Ken said he cleared clutter. Ken said he organized. Grace stands anyway. She walks down the short corridor, one careful step at a time, and aims herself toward the kitchen. She can already picture it. The tin of sugar on the counter, the kettle, the spoon. Something fast. Something simple. Something that turns the shaking off. Her fingers wrap around the kitchen handle. It doesn't give. She tries again, harder. The handle barely moves, like it's stuck in a lie. Then the lock speaks. A small, clean sound. A red blink under the keypad. Denied. The beep is not loud. It doesn't need to be. In the silence of the apartment, it lands like a verdict. Grace leans her forehead against the door. She swallows, forcing saliva that isn't there. She taps the keypad with a trembling finger, slow and unsure. Denied. A new wave rolls through her, heat, then cold. Her knees soften. She catches herself on the wall, breathing through her mouth like she's been running. Ken, she whispers, and the name comes out then. She turns and stumbles back toward her room, toward her phone. The screen glares bright in the dark. Her fingers don't obey. She presses his contact twice, 3 times. It rings. Nothing. She tries again. Voicemail. Grace sits on the edge of her bed, shoulders caving inward, fighting the fog that starts to creep into her thoughts. The world narrows to the sound of her own breath and the memory of that beep. Denied. 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 Somewhere outside, a car door slams. Footsteps in the corridor. A voice, distant, urgent. Then the siren arrives. One long, rising complaint that fills the night and refuses to let go. By morning, Ken stands in the living room with his jaw set, speaking in a steady voice, like steadiness can rewrite reality. She keeps eating at night, he says. I'm trying to help her. It's for her own good. But the paramedic's gloves are still on the floor, and Grace won't meet his eyes. And when Ken hears that red beep again in his head, he doesn't feel guilt. He feels confirmation. He thinks the crisis proves he needs tighter rules. Because if this is what happens with one locked door, what happens when we learn what else he's been locking down? Morning comes too bright, too ordinary. Sunlight climbs through the curtains like nothing happened, like there wasn't a siren outside this building a few hours ago. The apartment smells of tea and antiseptic wipes. Someone has opened a window. Nairobi traffic hums in the distance, steady and indifferent. Grace sits on the sofa with a blanket pulled over her shoulders, even though the air is warm. Her hands are calmer now, but her eyes keep drifting to the kitchen door. Ken moves through the living room like a man resetting a system. He talks softly, the way people talk to a child they don't trust not to wander into the road. Mom, he says, kneeling in front of her, we need structure. We need rules. You know how you get at night. Grace blinks slowly. Her face is tired in a deep way that isn't sleep. It's the kind of tired that comes from being told your body is a problem you keep creating on purpose. I was not snacking, she says. The words come out careful, like she's testing the floor before she steps. Ken doesn't take the correction. He smooths it over. I'm not blaming you, he says, and the sentence lands like blame anyway. I'm protecting you. The kitchen stays closed after 10. No exceptions. It's for your own good. He says the phrase the way people say amen. Grace's gaze flicks to the kitchen again. She doesn't argue. She doesn't fight. Not because she agrees, because she's calculating. How much energy does it take to win a battle you're not allowed to name? Ken stands, satisfied. He opens his phone and checks an app with the confidence of someone checking a bank balance. A small icon of a lock sits on his screen, clean and final. He scrolls, taps, confirms. The schedule is still there. 10 p.m. Lock. 6 all unknown p.m. Lock. 6:00 a.m. Unlock. Ken smiles like this is medicine. Kev arrives mid-morning with a packet of bread and a bag of oranges, still wearing yesterday's hoodie like he ran straight over. Ken meets him at the door before Kev can even step fully inside. She's fine, Ken says quickly. It was just, sugar stuff. Kev looks past him and sees Grace on the sofa. Sees the blanket. Sees the way she's sitting like a guest in her own house. Kev lowers his voice. Why is the kitchen locked? Ken doesn't flinch. He's ready for this question. He's rehearsed it. She can't keep doing late-night eating, he says. It's dangerous. The doctor said lock the kitchen? Kev asks. Ken's eyes narrow for half a second, then soften again. He switches back to gentle. You're young. You don't understand how serious this is, he says. I'm the one here. I'm the one paying for the meds, the checkups, the groceries. I'm the one waking up when she's shaky. I have to manage it. Grace's fingers tighten under the blanket, not enough for anyone to call it anger. Just enough to be real. Later, when Ken leaves the room to take a call, Grace stands and walks to her bedroom. Kev follows, quiet. Inside, Grace opens a drawer and pulls out a small plastic bag. A few biscuits. 2 sugar sachets stolen from a cafe weeks ago. Not a feast. Not a habit. A lifeline, hidden like contraband. Kev stares at the bag, then back at her. Why are you hiding food? He whispers. Grace doesn't answer immediately. Her pride fights her fear and loses. Because if I ask, she says, voice low, he will look at me like I am doing it on purpose. Kev's stomach tightens. He can still hear the siren in his head, even in the daylight. He can still imagine that red beep in the dark denied like a door slamming on someone who's already falling. When Ken returns, he's smiling again, cheerful in a way that doesn't match the room. I'm going to sort this properly, he says. No more drama. We follow the plan. Doctor's orders. Kev watches Grace's face at those words. And somewhere in his chest, a hard question forms sharp enough to cut through family loyalty. Which doctor? Because the first time a real clinician hears Ken say doctor's orders, Ken's entire story is about to meet someone who doesn't care how confident he sounds. Ken leaves the apartment like he's leaving a problem on pause. In the lift, he checks his phone before he checks his reflection. One tap, and the smart lock app opens. A small green line shows the schedule is active. Another screen shows admin Ken Otieno. That word admin settles him. By the time he reaches the CBD, Ken is already rewriting last night into something clean enough to tell. At his desk, he keeps his voice low, respectful, almost noble. He tells a colleague his mother's diabetes is getting complicated. He says he's trying to keep her stable. He doesn't mention the locked door. He doesn't mention the red beep. He says the right things in the right order and watches people soften toward him. Sympathy is fuel. It makes his choices feel certified. Back in Westlands, Grace moves through the apartment with the careful timing of someone trying not to trigger a rule. She cooks earlier than she wants. She drinks water when she wants tea, just so she won't have to go near the kitchen close to 10. When the clock creeps toward night, she finds herself watching her own life shrink into allowed hours. She hates that most of all. Not the diabetes, not the injections. The way she has to ask permission in her own home without actually asking. She catches herself thinking like this, if I feel low after 10, I must be strong. I must wait. I must not disturb him. That thought scares her more than the shaking. In the afternoon, the technician comes. Tommy Okafor is the kind of man who doesn't waste words. He carries a small toolkit and a phone charger in his pocket, and his eyes take in details without asking. Ken meets him at the kitchen door like a proud owner showing off an upgrade. The lock is acting up, Ken says. Sometimes it doesn't read the code fast. Tommy tests it, taps the keypad, listens to the mechanism respond. He scrolls through the settings on Ken's phone, and his brows pinch in a way he tries to hide. You've enabled remote deny, Tommy says. casual on the surface. Silent mode too, and the autolock schedule is tight. Ken's tone stays smooth. I like things organized. Tommy nods slowly, but his eyes flick toward Grace, who stands a little too far away, hands clasped like she's waiting to be dismissed. Most clients want convenience, Tommy thinks. This is something else. He clears his throat. You know, for a diabetic person, access to sugar can't be treated like a privilege. Ken smiles, quick and bright, the smile of a man who hears a challenge and turns it into agreement. That's why I'm doing it, he says, for her own good. Grace doesn't argue. She just looks at the door as if it's learning her. That night, Ken double-checks the schedule from his bed. 10 to 6. Locked, controlled. He falls asleep believing he solved the problem, but in the early hours when the body doesn't follow schedules, Grace wakes again with that hollow drop inside her, and the apartment holds its breath for a second time. And when the second ambulance comes, the hospital doesn't just take her blood sugar. Someone finally starts collecting something Ken can't talk his way out of: time. The second collapse doesn't announce itself with drama. It arrives the way danger often arrives in a home, quiet, familiar, and a little too fast. Grace wakes up soaked in sweat, her heart sprinting in her chest while the rest of her body feels underwater. Her thoughts come in pieces. She tries to sit up and can't tell if she's sitting or falling. In the corridor, the kitchen door is still there. The lock is still there. The rule is still there. She doesn't even reach for the handle this time. She reaches for her phone with fingers that keep missing the screen. And when she finally gets Ken's number, she can't remember what she's trying to say. Just air. Just panic. Ken bolts upright in bed and hears a sound he doesn't like, his mother's voice, wrong and far away. He rushes to her room, switches on the light, and sees her eyes moving without landing. This time, he doesn't lecture. This time, he grabs his keys. By the time they reach the emergency center in Westlands, Grace is shivering hard enough to shake the stretcher rail. Her mouth forms words that don't hold. Ken walks beside her, speaking for her, his hand already on the story. Her sugar drops, he tells the triage desk. She doesn't listen about eating habits. I'm trying to manage it. Nurse Aisha Mwangi meets them with the calm of someone who has seen 100 emergencies and doesn't confuse calm with slow. She takes one look at Grace's face and shifts closer, voice firm but gentle. Mama, can you hear me? What is your name? Grace blinks. Her lips move. The name doesn't come. Ken leans in. Grace Otieno, he says quickly. Aisha's eyes flick to him. Let her try, she says, still polite but not yielding. She checks the basics, asks about insulin, timing, food, symptoms. Each time she directs the question to Grace, Ken answers like he's translating. Each time, Grace flinches a little, like his words are pushing hers out of the room. Aisha pulls up the file from the previous visit. Her face doesn't change, but something in her attention tightens. Severe hypoglycemia. Nighttime onset. Delayed correction. Same words, same pattern. Aisha looks at Ken. What do you do when she's low at night? Ken doesn't hesitate. We stopped late night eating. The kitchen is off limits after 10. She snacks, her sugar gets worse. I'm strict because it's necessary. Aisha holds his gaze. When she's low, she repeats, slower, what do you give her to bring it up? Ken opens his mouth, then closes it. Grace's eyes find Aisha's for a second. Shame, yes, but behind it fear, the kind that asks permission to survive. Aisha turns back to the chart and documents carefully, line by line. Who speaks? What is said? What is avoided? She remembers the discharge instruction from the first visit: keep fast sugar accessible, because she's the one who's read it aloud to families who nod and then go home and do the opposite. Grace stabilizes, but Aisha can't shake the timing. 2 ambulance rides in 1 week, both at night, both with delayed correction. As Ken signs papers with the confident air of a man who believes love cancels consequences, Aisha watches him and feels something cold settle in her gut. The detail she can't forget isn't the number on the monitor. It's his certainty while Grace stays silent. And as Aisha clocks out later, she already knows she isn't letting the stay of family matter. Ken doesn't treat the last week like a warning. He treats it like a story he can polish. By afternoon, he's on the phone, voice warm, controlled, the same way he speaks in office meetings when he wants people to agree without realizing they've been cornered. He calls an aunt in Kisumu, a cousin in Eastlands, a church friend Grace used to laugh with before she started avoiding people. Mom is stubborn, he says with a tired little chuckle that invites sympathy. She keeps sneaking food at night, so I'm putting boundaries. It's for her own good. He keeps repeating that phrase until it sounds like a diagnosis. In the building corridor, he repeats it again, this time to Mr. Barasa, the caretaker who knows everyone's footsteps and every family's secrets. Barasa nods the way caretakers nod when tenants want them to nod. He's careful. He doesn't like trouble. He doesn't like getting involved. Ken gestures toward the kitchen door as if it's a responsible decision, a safety feature, like a fire extinguisher. It's not like I'm locking her up, Ken says, smiling. The kitchen is never fully locked, it's just managed. Barasa keeps his face neutral, but his memory doesn't match Ken's sentence. Because after the first ambulance, after the siren, after the stretcher wheels, after Grace's weak voice, Barasa sees Ken in the corridor. Phone out, standing close to the keypad. Ken's shoulders are tense, his thumb moving fast. Barasa hears the lock chirp twice. Ken isn't managing. Ken is changing something. A code, maybe. Access, definitely. Barasa doesn't say it out loud. In this city, you survive by choosing your silences carefully. But the detail stays in his head like a stone. Right after the first emergency, Ken tightens the lock. 2 doors down, Miriam Naroge Marie steps out to throw away trash and catches the end of Ken's hallway speech. She's a journalist in the way some people are quietly dangerous. She notices patterns, and she hates gaps where truth should be. She doesn't interrupt. She just listens. A diabetic woman, 2 ambulances, and the solution is locking the kitchen? Miri watches Grace later, passing through the corridor with her eyes lowered, moving like she's trying to take up less space than her own shadow. That night, Miri texts Barasa a simple question. What time were the ambulances? Barasa stares at the screen for a long moment. Then he answers with what he remembers. After midnight. Both times. Miri feels her stomach drop. It's not proof, not yet, but it's shape. It's a pattern. And Ken keeps talking, louder now, more confident, because the more people he convinces, the harder it becomes for anyone to accuse him of harm. Across town, Nurse Aisha Mwangi sits with Grace's file open again, eyes moving over the same lines. Severe hypoglycemia, nighttime onset, delayed correction. She hears Ken's voice in her head doctor's orders. For your own good, and she feels something inside her settle into a decision. If this is going to stop, it won't stop through hints. It will stop through documentation. And tomorrow, Aisha is going to put the pattern on paper where it can't be laughed off, loved away, or locked behind a door. Aisha doesn't sleep well after the second night. It isn't the alarms or the rushing feet in the hallway of the ER. It's the calm voice of a son, explaining danger like he's explaining discipline. By midday, she stops telling herself to wait and see. She walks into an office down the corridor where the air is always too still, where paperwork becomes action if you write the right sentence the right way. Celine Curie looks up from a stack of files and reads Aisha's face before Aisha even speaks. I need you to look at something, Aisha says. 2 admissions. Same patient. Same time window. Same outcome. Celine doesn't roll her eyes. She doesn't ask if Aisha is being emotional. She pulls the chart, flips through the notes, and her mouth tightens in a line that means she's already calculating risk. What's the common factor? Celine asks. Alicia taps the page. Delayed correction, nighttime, and the son keeps saying he has rules at home. Celine reads again, slower. Then she reaches for a form that changes everything. Not a dramatic accusation, not a headline. A procedural step. A safety concern. A follow-up that cannot be undone once it exists. This stays patient-centered, Celine says. But it gets documented. They build the file carefully, ER notes from both nights. Discharge guidance highlighted in clean, unforgiving ink. Keep fast sugar accessible. Do not delay carbohydrates during suspected lows. Aisha adds a factual line about communication. Son answers questions before patient can respond. Celine makes a call and schedules a follow-up with Dr. Joseph Wikasa, a physician who doesn't tolerate vague explanations when timing and insulin are involved. Bring her in, Celine says, and bring whoever is managing the home. When Ken gets the appointment message, he reads it like an invitation to prove himself right. He arrives dressed neat, shoulders squared, voice preloaded with responsibility. Grace walks beside him, quiet, holding her handbag like it's the only boundary she still owns. At the clinic, Celine greets them, then turns to Grace first. "Mama Grace," she says gently, "before we start, would you like a few minutes alone? Just you and me?" Ken's smile freezes. "There's no need," he says quickly. "I'm her caregiver." Celine doesn't argue, she just waits. Grace's eyes flick to Ken, then down. Then she nods once, small and firm. Ken's jaw flexes as he sits outside. Inside, the room feels different without him filling the air. Grace speaks in fragments at first, embarrassed by her own fear. "The kitchen," she admits. "After 10, I can't go in. When I feel low, I try not to wake him. I try to wait." Celine keeps her voice steady. "Do you have sugar by your bed?" Grace shakes her head. Celine exhales through her nose, controlled. Then she opens the door and calls Ken back in now with a plan forming, sharp-edged and official. "Dr. Dintz." Wakesa listens to Ken's explanation without interrupting. When Ken finishes, Wakesa asks one question, plain and specific. "You have a smart lock," he says. "Where are the access logs?" Ken hesitates, hand tightening around his phone. "That's private," he says. "It's my device." Celine's tone stays calm. "It's also the timeline," she says. "And we need it." Ken looks at the phone in his palm like it's still his shield. He doesn't realize it's about to become the witness. Dr. Wakesa doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. He sits back in his chair and looks at Ken the way a man looks at a puzzle piece that doesn't fit, calm, patient, and absolutely unwilling to force it. "Let's stop talking in general terms," he says. "Give me exact times." Ken blinks. "Times?" Wakesa repeats. "When does she inject? When does she inject? When does she eat? When does she crash? When does she arrive at the ER?" Aisha has already prepared for this. She slides 2 pages across the desk-clean printouts from the emergency visits. "First admission," Aisha says, tapping the line with her pen. "Arrival at 2014 a.m. She taps the second page. "Second admission. Arrival at 1:52 a.m. Ken leans forward, ready to counter with confidence. "She's eating at night, that's why." Wakesha lifts a hand, not rude, just final. "We're not there yet." He turns to Grace. "Mama Grace, do you check your sugar at night?" Grace's eyes drop to her hands. She doesn't like being the center of anything, but she's too tired to keep protecting a story that keeps putting her in an ambulance. "Sometimes," she says, "when I wake up, I feel strange, shaky, sweating." "And what do you do?" Wakesa asks. Grace hesitates. The pause is heavy. "I try to go to the kitchen," she admits softly. Ken's head snaps toward her. "Mom." Celine's voice cuts in, firm and controlled. "Let her finish." Grace swallows. But the door is locked. Silence lands in the room. Not dramatic silence. The kind that makes everyone suddenly aware of air moving through a vent. Wakesa looks at Ken again. "Show me the lock data." Ken's thumb hovers over his phone like it's a trigger. His pride wants to refuse. His fear wants to comply. He unlocks the screen and pulls up the smart lock app. A history tab. Rows of events. He angles it toward the doctor like he expects validation. Wakesa doesn't react yet. He just asks, "Can you export it?" Tommy's earlier setup makes it easy. Ken taps, shares, sends. A moment later, Celine's computer pings. She opens a file. A list appears, timestamps, events, cold and precise. Wakesa leans forward. "Kitchen door," he reads. "Auto lock, 10:00 p.m. Ken nods quickly. "Exactly, so she won't snack." Wakesa continues, voice steady. "Denied entry," he reads. 1007 a.m. Grace's shoulders tighten. Wakesa keeps going. "Denied entry," he reads. 111:11 a.m. Denied entry. 1:19 a.m. Aisha's jaw sets. Her pattern is no longer a feeling. It's printed. Wakesa turns to Grace's notebook, her personal glucose log, worn and creased from years of keeping herself alive. He runs a finger down the page until he finds the same night. 1007 a.m. Feels shaky, he reads. Suspected low. He looks up at Ken. "Your lock denies her at 1007. Ken opens his mouth. No sound comes out. Wakesa doesn't stop. He speaks the timeline aloud, simple enough for a child. sharp enough to cut through excuses. Lock out at 10, he says. She wakes low. She goes for sugar. Denied. Denied again. Minutes pass. Her brain runs out of fuel. Then an ambulance. Ken's face shifts like a mask cracking from the inside. He shakes his head once too fast. I was trying to, for your own good, Aisha says quietly, not accusing, just repeating the phrase back into the room where it finally sounds like what it is. Wikesa folds his hands. Now we're done debating motives, he says. Now we talk about harm, and what must happen next. Ken stares at the kitchen lock history like it's a stranger's confession, and in that tight, quiet clinic room, he realizes something he never considered. The evidence isn't emotional. It doesn't care that he loves his mother. It only cares that the door says Denis when her body is begging for sugar. Dr. Wikesa keeps the lock log open on the desk, not as a threat as a mirror. He speaks with the steadiness of someone who has seen how fast a small decision becomes a funeral. Mama Grace is insulin dependent, he says. Nighttime hypoglycemia is not a behavior problem. It's a medical emergency. If she needs sugar and you block her access, you are increasing the risk of seizure, coma, death. The words don't come with drama. That's what makes them hit harder. Ken's throat moves. He tries to swallow them down. I was trying to stop her from eating, Ken says, voice tightening. Snacking makes her sugar go up. Then she crashes. It's a cycle. Wikesa doesn't argue the emotion. He corrects the logic. You don't prevent a low by removing the cure, he says. You prevent lows with the right insulin timing, the right meals, the right monitoring, and immediate access to fast carbohydrates when symptoms start. Celine sits forward, pen already moving. She's not here to shame Ken. She's here to make the next night safer than the last. We're putting a safety plan in place today, she says. Not tomorrow. Today. Ken lifts his hands, palms out, like he's negotiating. We can talk about it at home. I'll adjust. This is the adjustment, Celine says, still calm, still professional. And it gets documented. Ken's eyes narrow. Documented how? Aisha watches him carefully. She knows that question. People ask it when they suddenly understand that the story is no longer theirs to control. Celine keeps her tone even. As a patient safety concern, she says, because there is a repeat pattern of severe lows at night with delayed correction, because there is a confirmed household restriction, because this is preventable. Ken exhales sharply. So now you're saying I'm abusing my mother? No one bites the word. No one gives him the fight he wants. Wikesa answers instead, direct and precise. I'm saying your system is dangerous, he says, and I'm saying it stops today. Ken tries another angle, faster. She's difficult. She doesn't follow advice. She lies about what she eats. Grace's shoulders pull in at the word difficult, not because it's new, because it's familiar. Wikesa turns the focus back where it belongs. Mama Grace, he says gently, when you feel low at night, do you need permission to get sugar? Grace's mouth opens, then closes. The honesty is heavy. Yes, she says, I do. Ken flinches like he's been slapped by a fact. Celine slides a printed page across the desk toward Ken. It isn't punishment. It's a plan with boxes that must be checked. Here's what happens next, she says. 1. Glucose tablets by her bedside every night. 2. A hypoglycemia protocol written clearly what to do at symptoms, what number means emergency, when to call. 3. No locked room restrictions between her and food. Not the kitchen, not a cupboard, not anything. Ken's voice rises, so I just let her eat whatever she wants at 2 a.m. Wikesa meets his eyes. You let her treat a low, he says, and you stop confusing treatment with indulgence. Celine adds, 4. If any smart device remains in the home, admin access is shared. You don't hold the only key. If the device can deny entry, then someone else must be able to override it. Ken shakes his head once, hard. This is my house. Aisha speaks for the first time in minutes, quiet but sharp. It's her body, she says, and her life. Wikesa turns one page in the file, then reads a single sentence out loud slowly, so it lands exactly where it should. Patient delayed access to carbohydrates due to household restriction, he reads. Ken's face drains. The line sits there like a stamp. Wikesa doesn't glare. He doesn't accuse. He simply states the consequence. You will remove the lock, he says, or you will relinquish control of it immediately, and we will schedule follow-ups. We will check how this plan is being followed. Because if she returns here again with the same pattern, the next steps won't be a conversation. Ken tries to speak. What comes out is smaller than he expects. I didn't think, he starts. Grace looks at him then, finally. Not with hate, with something colder and clearer. You did think, she says softly. You just didn't think of me. Ken sits very still, phone heavy in his hand. The lock log still open like a confession that won't close. The appointment ends with signatures, dates, and a plan he doesn't control. And on the drive home, the apartment's kitchen door waits for them, ordinary wood, ordinary handle, and one small device that still knows how to say "denied." Grace listens to Ken's silence and makes a decision of her own, one he can't schedule, one he can't override. The apartment feels smaller when they return, not because the walls move, because the rules are still hanging in the air, invisible and heavy. Ken walks straight to the kitchen door like it's going to argue with him. The lock sits there, smooth and confident, a little black square that used to make him feel in charge. Grace doesn't follow. She goes to her bedroom first. She opens her handbag and takes out what she bought on the way home. Glucose tablets, plain and chalky, sealed in a bright tube. She sets them on her bedside table with care, like placing a key where it belongs. Then she sits down by the window. Outside, Westlands keeps moving cars, voices, a boda passing too fast. Life that doesn't wait for anyone's control. Kev arrives before sunset. Ken didn't call him. Grace did. Kev steps inside and reads the room in one breath. Grace upright, quiet. Ken standing near the kitchen door, like a guard who's been fired but hasn't accepted it. What happened at the clinic? Kev asks. Ken answers like he's still negotiating. They overreacted. They don't understand how stubborn she can be. They made it sound like I wanted. Kev cuts in, voice low. Did you lock her out when she was low? Ken's eyes flick away. I locked the kitchen, he says. I locked the kitchen to stop the snacking. That's all. Kev nods once, slow. But the lows happened at night, he says, and she went for sugar, and the door said no. Ken flinches at the simplicity. Grace speaks without turning from the window. I didn't go for a meal, she says. I went for help. The sentence is quiet, but it lands like a door closing on Ken's excuses. Ken reaches for his phone. His thumb opens the app I Have It, the same way an anxious person checks a lock twice before bed. The schedule stares back at him. 10 to 6 like, it's still normal. He hesitates, and for a second he hears it in his head. The red blink, the small clean beep. Denied. Ken swallows hard and starts tapping. He deletes the schedule. He turns off remote deny. He removes himself as the only admin and adds Kev, then Grace her name on the screen like a fact that can't be argued. Then he pauses, jaw tight, and disables the lock entirely. The kitchen handle turns smoothly now, as if it's been waiting to do the right thing. Ken stands there, hands still on the door, and finally looks at his mother. I'm sorry, he says, and it isn't a performance. Not, sorry you got scared. Sorry I made you ask permission to stay alive. Sorry I humiliated you. Grace turns from the window. Her eyes are steady. I am not a project, she says. If you want to help, you listen. If you want control, you leave it. Ken nods once, small. The nod costs him something, which is how you know it's real. That night, the kitchen door stays open, but Ken lies awake anyway, learning the hardest truth of caregiving. Without control, love has to become skill. And in the quiet, as Grace reaches to touch the glucose tablets beside her bed, Ken realizes tomorrow won't be about a lock. It will be about what he does when no one is watching. Weeks pass, and the nights stop feeling like a countdown. Grace's body doesn't become perfect. Diabetes doesn't reward anyone with perfection, but the apartment is no longer a place where survival depends on permission. On the fridge on the outside, where everyone can see it, Grace tapes a simple protocol card. Dr. Wakasa helps them write. If shaky or sweating at night, take glucose. Recheck in 15 minutes. If confused, cannot swallow, or unconscious, call emergency help. It's plain. It's practical. It doesn't ask for pride. It doesn't ask for Ken's approval. The kitchen door remains just a door. In the clinic, Aisha keeps doing her job, but she does it differently now. She listens harder for the gap between what families say and what bodies show. She asks for timelines. She asks who holds the keys to the home. She documents without apology. Celine calls her one afternoon and speaks like this is normal because for Celine it is. "Your report mattered," she says. "We wouldn't have had the leverage without the pattern you saw." Aisha doesn't celebrate. She exhales. "I just didn't want her back in the same state," she replies. "She might not be," Celine says, "because you wrote it down." Ken attends a caregiver education session the clinic offers. He sits in the back at first, arms crossed like someone forced into a lecture. Then the educator starts describing hypoglycemia, how it can happen, even when someone follows the rules, how fear makes caregivers clamp down, how control can masquerade as love. Ken feels the words land in places he didn't know were exposed. He thinks about the phrase he used like a shield, "for your own good." He hears it now the way Grace must have heard it, a soft sentence that can still lock a door. One evening, after a follow-up appointment where Grace speaks for herself without Ken stepping in, they walk home through the bustle of Westlands. Grace moves at her own pace. Ken matches it without pushing. At the apartment, Ken picks up his phone and opens the smart lock app out of reflex, then stops. There is no schedule to check, no admin power to confirm, no red beep waiting. He presses and holds the icon until it shakes, then deletes it. Not for symbolism, for safety, for surrender. Grace watches him and says nothing. She doesn't grant him forgiveness like a reward. She simply lives her life in front of him, letting him learn what he should have learned earlier. Support is not control. Help is not a cage. Later, Ken hears laughter from Grace's room, her on a call with someone from her old support group, the one she stopped attending when Shame moved in. The sound is small, but it changes the shape of the apartment. Aisha's name never becomes a headline. It doesn't need to. In this city, sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's a kitchen door that opens at 2 a.m., and a family finally learning that for your own good only means something when the person at risk still gets to choose.